Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Sexual Assault Victim Advocate Fundamentals training series. Today is day 2 of this training series, and today's presentation is on the intersection of intimate partner violence and sexual assault. Before we begin, I would like to provide a sensitive subject matter warning. Today's training may contain sensitive subject matter that may cause participants to experience strong emotional reactions. We encourage you to reach out to your support networks for help if needed, and take care of yourself during today's training. And with that, I will turn it over to our presenter for today, and I'll be posting some reminders in the chat. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Toni Corral Evans. I am the Training and Special Projects Administrator for the Maryland Network Against Domestic Violence. And today we are going to be talking about the intersection of intimate partner violence and sexual assault. Going on to the next slide, you can read all this stuff about me at your own leisure. We won't worry about that right now. Let's just say I've been doing this for a very long time. Today's learning objectives, we want to be able to define domestic violence and identify the common dynamics of DV and the tactics used by abusive partners to maintain power and control. We also want to highlight the intersections of intimate partner violence and sexual violence and determine best practices when screening for intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and providing crisis intervention. So we are going to go ahead and jump right on in with definitions, dynamics, and statistics. This is just kind of like your baseline background information. So what is domestic violence, or what is intimate partner violence? And we use the terms interchangeably. IPV is a little more inclusive. Some people will say domestic and dating violence. All of those we use to mean anybody who is in a relationship with somebody that is an intimate relationship, right? So domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that is used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over another intimate partner. Domestic violence can be physical, sexual, emotional, economic, psychological, or technological. These can be actions or threats of actions or other patterns of coercive behavior that influence another person within an intimate partner relationship. And so there are multiple characteristics here. There are so many different ways that something can be domestic violence. It is not just physical. It's not what, for so many years, the poster for domestic violence was someone that looked just like me, blonde hair, blue eyes with a big black eye. That is not all that domestic violence is, and it certainly does not just affect one demographic of people. So when we talk about domestic violence, we have the power and control wheel, and you should have a copy of this, or you'll get one. And it has 8 spokes on it. Now, the power and control wheel, one of the things that we talk about is that this is the Duluth model, and this has only been validated on female victims and male perpetrators. Therefore, you will notice there is very gendered language in here. Please understand that that does not mean that domestic violence does not happen to people of other genders. And so when we do additional power and control tactics. We do matrices that are more inclusive and also that deal with special populations that might not otherwise fit into the always pattern of male perpetrator, female victim, right? So the first tactic is using coercion and threats. These are, that is fairly simple to understand, right? Threatening to hurt the person, threatening to leave them, threatening to commit suicide is a big one. If you leave me, I'll kill myself. Threatening to report them to immigration, to the welfare system, to social services, all sorts of things. So any type of threat or coercive behavior. Intimidation. Intimidation can be as simple as a look or a gesture. It can be reminding the person that they have weapons that they can use. It can be punching the wall next to them and saying things like, that could have been you. It might be smashing things, destroying their property, letting them know that they have complete control, right? Abusing pets is a big part of intimidation, and that abuse can go from anywhere from neglect all the way up to killing the pet, right? And saying, I can do this to your pet, I can do this to you. And it's important to understand that intimidation only has to be felt by the person, the survivor, the victim, the person who is experiencing it. Something may not seem intimidating to you, but it could be incredibly intimidating to them. And for that, I'll give an example of a uh, survivor who was going to court, and when the abusive partner, every time he would rape her, he would put on this loud music so their kids wouldn't hear anything. And so when they were in the courtroom, he started, before the judge came in, whistling that tune. While that tune might not mean anything else to anybody, it was incredibly triggering and intimidating for that victim. So, does that make sense? If you have any questions as we're going along, please feel free to put them in the chat. And I'll be asking questions and things as we go along. So, if you have, when I say, like, does that make sense? Go ahead and put a thumbs up in the chat, or some sort of emoji that's like, yeah, I get that. And so that's really important to understand that, intimidation does not have to be for everybody, right? It might just be one person. And if that person perceives it that way, it's intimidating. Um, Emotional abuse. We know that emotional abuse is one of the first tactics that an abusive partner is going to use, right? Because they're trying to break the person down. So they put them down, they make them feel bad about themselves. They call them names. It might be telling somebody they're fat or they're lazy or nobody else will want you, right? And so that breaking down in that emotional abuse is what makes it to the point where the person feels when these coercion and these intimidation and threats, they have already been broken down to the point where they believe all the things that this person is saying. So if they say to them, I'm going to do this, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to hurt your pet, I'm going to, I'm going to report you to so and so, they believe it. And so that emotional abuse is part of that breaking down of the victim so that they can maintain power and control. Isolation. Isolation can be both physical and mental. So I know of a case where somebody moved someone, literally a highly intelligent, successful young woman, government job in DC, and moved her to a remote part of the state, away from all of her friends, away from all of her family, no cell phone, no landline, living in a trailer. She could not drive. She didn't know how because she'd always lived near DC and had used the metro. Um, Completely isolated her. She could only use the phone when they went over to his parents' house, and there was always somebody there with her. So he was always there. He could always hear everything she said. So if her friends were like, are you okay? She had to basically say, yeah, I'm fine, because otherwise he would know. And so the idea of isolating somebody, and then their friends thinking, the person will think, well, I've walked away from my friends. I can't turn back to them. I was horrible to them because this person told me they really didn't have my best interests at heart. When really their friends often know exactly what's going on and will gladly take that phone call and help them, but they don't believe that somebody will. Um, so it can be physically removing them, but sometimes it can be just mentally isolating them, telling them, you can't go outside. You can't go out with your friends. making them report in if they're going out with their friends, um, uh, you know, using jealousy to justify their actions. Oh, well, when you go out, I know that all these guys are looking at you and I don't want you to be in that situation, right? So, isolation can be both physical isolation and mental isolation. Both of them have the same effect. They make the victim feel like they have nowhere to turn. And then you get into minimizing, denying, and blaming. And these are the cases where the abusive partner will say things like, oh, it wasn't that bad. It was just a love tap. I didn't really hit you that hard. Or denying that it happened at all. I didn't shove you. You tripped. You're such a klutz. You do that all the time, right? That's denying. And then there's blaming. Well, I wouldn't have gotten angry if you would have cleaned the house yesterday like I told you to, right? So minimizing, denying, and blaming often get put into the same category, and that is something called gaslighting, right? And it's literally designed to make the person feel like they are going crazy, like they know something happened, but yet it didn't happen, right? That's what the person's telling them. They're like, no, I know this happened. They're like, no, no, it didn't. You're not thinking straight, right? So we've all, if you've heard of gaslighting, can I get like a thumbs up or something or an emoji? And that's where, and gaslighting comes from a movie of the type Gaslight, where literally a man made his wife feel like she was going crazy by using the gas lights that were there, turning them off and on. Um, Using children, just an awful, terrible tactic for both the survivor and for those kids. They may use the children as go betweens. They may threaten the children. They may uh, threaten to take the children away, report the person. Let's say one person has documents and the other person doesn't. We're threatening to report them and threatening to, saying, I'm going to keep the children, or saying they're going to take the children or return to a country of origin, and this person will never be able to find them, right? So using children is a really vile tactic. And then there's using male privilege. Again, this can extend to any kind of privilege, not just male privilege. Here it says male privilege, treating somebody like a servant, making all the big decisions. Like you don't need to worry about that. It sounds so sweet. Oh, you don't need to worry about that. I'll take care of it. I'll take care of you. But when you have no control over major decisions that are made, are you buying a house? Are you buying a car? Where are the finances? All of that. What is going on? Where are we going on vacation? Where are the kids going to school? Right? Those are all major decisions that you should be partners in. And when somebody's just like, nope, I'm just going to make all the decisions. Um, and I'm going to define what you do. That's my job as the person who's in control, and your job is to do what I tell you to do, right? And that often breaks down into a male female kind of binary in terms of what people think of culturally as male jobs and female jobs. And then there's economic abuse. Economic abuse exists in 99% of all domestic violence cases. I'm going to say that again. Economic abuse exists in 99% of all domestic violence cases. So, economic abuse is a huge part of what happens. And sometimes it is one of the first things that happens. It's preventing or keeping somebody from getting a job or making them quit the job that they have or sabotaging their job so that they cannot go to work and get any money to get out, right? It can be asking the person, making the victim ask for money, making the survivor beg for money, right? Giving the survivor an allowance like they're a child, right? Like how much, when you think about power and control, like how infantilizing that is, um, to be like, you get an allowance, right? Um, taking the survivor's money. Maybe the survivor is working, right? And the perpetrator isn't working. The abusive partner isn't working. So the abusive partner just takes all the survivor's money, goes and just lives the high life while the survivor's busting their butt trying to, keep them afloat. Putting all of the debts in the survivor's name and all of the assets in the perpetrator's name. That is a big one. This is how we wind up with people who come out of relationships and find out that they have thousands and thousands of dollars of debt that they didn't even know existed. And coerced debt, where they're like, you just need to sign this credit card application. And the person's like, I don't need a credit card. And they're like, just sign it or else, right? That intimidation and threats. So you can see that there is so much more than physical and sexual violence. Those are absolutely huge parts of power and control and of intimate partner violence, but they are only part of it. So much more is happening psychologically and mentally. Are there any questions before we move on from this section? I just want to give everybody a chance to kind of take all this in because this is pretty heavy. All right, let's go ahead and go on. So we're going to play this video. And I really like this video because even though it is geared towards younger people, it really gives you some clear-cut examples that you can use, that you can see of different types of control.
Wow, glad you're here. I just found out that one of my best friends was in an abusive relationship for so long, and none of us knew anything about it. I'm heartbroken. I thought we told each other everything. Maybe if I had spoken up, she would have talked to me about it sooner. So, here goes.
Intimate partner violence, sometimes called teen dating violence or domestic violence, is a pattern of behaviors used by one partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. An intimate partner is a person's boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, partner, or lover. Intimate partner violence may include different kinds of abuse. Physical abuse may include hitting, kicking, punching, or other kinds of physical violence. Emotional abuse may not include physical violence, but it can be equally as harmful. When someone is abused emotionally, they may be called names, humiliated, yelled at, or made to feel intimidated. The abuser may try to control the other person by telling them what to do, what to wear, or where they can and cannot go. Financial abuse is when a person tries to control and limit their partner's access to money so that the partner will be dependent on them. One example would be if the person discouraged or disallowed the partner to work and make their own money. Another is if the person takes the partner's money or credit cards and refuses to give them back. Another form of abuse is known as stalking and harassment. Stalking or harassing someone may include spying on them or following them around and constantly showing up where they are or refusing to leave when asked. Stalking also can include sending harassing or unwanted emails, texts, or posts. Finally, there is partner abuse that involves sexual abuse. This type of violence is when a person forces their partner to participate in sexual acts or behaviors without their consent or ignores the partner's sexual boundaries. Just because a person is in an intimate relationship with someone doesn't mean that they must have sex with them or do sexual things that they find uncomfortable or demeaning. If you or someone you know is being abused in a relationship, it's important to know that it's never the fault of the abused person, and it's important to ask for help. To get help, you can talk to the school counselor, a social worker, or another trusted adult. A great resource if you need information, support, or advice is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. You can check out their website at www.thehotline.org or call 1-800-799-7233. Remember, domestic violence is not love. Someone who really loves you wouldn't try to physically harm you, control you, make you feel bad about yourself, or force you to do something that you don't want to do. A loving and healthy relationship is about consent, respect, and honoring who you are as an individual.
Till next time, don't forget to visit me at amaze.org or go to my YouTube channel to watch more. Bye!
As I said, I really like that video because you can use it even with young teens because it really gives them a great idea of what these things look like. So looking at the national prevalence of intimate partner violence, we know that approximately 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men will experience intimate partner violence during their lifetimes. And this statistic is old. We haven't gotten updated ones really, but I have to tell you, I think those numbers are low. Can sending unwanted pictures be a form of abuse? Kelly asks in the chat. Yes, absolutely. Sending unwanted pictures and also forcing the person to, coercing them into sending pictures is often a form of abuse because it's about control, right? It's about controlling the person, showing them who has the power in the relationship. So forcing somebody to look at pictures they don't want to look at or forcing somebody to send pictures they don't want to send very much can be part of abuse. And we can go ahead and go on. So the national prevalence of sexual assault and intimate partner sexual violence. When you look at female survivors of rape, only 53.3% are people that the intimate partner did not know in some way. 46.7% are people that the survivor knew, and 21.2 were intimate partners. The other ones would be people they may have known from school or work or maybe the coffee shop where they got their coffee in the morning, but they were known to the person. But 21% are intimate partners. And with males, it's 13%. Male survivors of rape are from intimate partners, with another 31% being people that they knew but weren't necessarily having a relationship with. We also always have to be really, really aware of intersectionality and understanding that there are most definite racial disparities when it comes to intimate partner violence. Different races experience IPV at higher rates. And so when we look at this and we look at, for example, Asian and Pacific Islander, and you'll notice that there is quite a range there from 21 to 55%, depending on which study you happen to be reading. It will tell you that that is, excuse me, Asian women who are reporting experiencing IPV or sexual assault during their lifetime goes up to over half in some of the reports, right? Another report from the National Latina Network that came out in 2020 said that 1 in 3 Latina women, as opposed to 1 in 4 overall, 1 in 3 Latina women experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime. 45.1% of Black women and 40.1% of Black men have experienced intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner sexual violence, and or intimate partner stalking. So those are really high numbers. And then over 84% of Native women experience violence during their lifetimes. I mean, when you look at that statistic, I mean, that is a very high percentage of people. I mean, you really have to roll the dice well to not wind up in that. And then when we go on to look at sexual orientation on the next slide, you'll see that there are extreme disparities here as well. When we look at intersectionality and sexual orientation, we realize that lesbian women, bisexual women experience intimate partner violence at higher rates than straight women, and gay men, bisexual men, experience higher rates than straight men and gay men, intimate partner, sexual violence, physical violence, and stalking. And when you look at those numbers, I mean, 61% as opposed to 35% for bisexual women. And then bisexual men, 37%. You'll notice that in both cases, bisexuals are at the highest point. Okay, Carly, you said, I don't understand the graph with percent of women versus male have been raped. Oh, that was the previous slide. Let's go. Can we go back one, Alyssa, so I can answer Carly's question? There we go. So what this is just saying that with female survivors of rape, 46.7% of them knew their attacker, right? 21.2% were an intimate partner, 25.5% were somebody they knew but was not an intimate partner. Maybe somebody they worked with, somebody they went to school with. Like I said, the person at the coffee shop that gave them their coffee every day. For men, it's 44.9% are people that they knew, 13% versus 31.9% non-intimate partner. And then if we go forward to the one on race, when you look at race for women who are white, it is closer. It's down to more like that 20, less than 20%, like 1 in 5. Yeah. So yeah. Why do bisexual individuals experience the highest rates of IPV? Oh, Catherine, it is the $1 million question. Nobody has bothered to research it because bisexuals are really very marginalized. There are kind of two theories on it. Number one is that for bisexual women especially, is that men will be like, if you just had one good sexual experience with a man, you wouldn't be bisexual, right? That's what they think. And so they think they can change them by forcing them to have sex. Absolutely wrong, of course, obviously. And the other theory is that, well, if you're bisexual, you'll sleep with anybody. So obviously you're easy and you'll sleep with me, right? And that's another terrifying thing. And bisexual oftentimes may not openly present as bisexual. They may present as heterosexual, especially if their current relationship is with a person of the opposite sex. And so that coercion has a whole nother level there, because the person can be like, if you don't do this, I'm going to out you and tell people that you're a woman who slept with women, you're a man who sleeps with men, right? So there's a lot of things. Bisexuals got blamed a lot for a lot of bad things that happened in the community. For example, bisexuals were blamed for bringing AIDS into the heterosexual community because they were sleeping with both people who were gay and sleeping with people who were not gay, right? So it was really very devastating, and they're often left out of conversations, even within their own community. Sometimes they are very marginalized as, well, why don't you just pick a side? And it's like, that's not who I am, right? So it's a little different. Yeah. Good questions. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. So when we are talking about prevalence, let's talk about Maryland specifically. We're going to talk a little bit about some changes over time. So in Maryland on September 12th, 2019, the National Network to End Domestic Violence does a survey every year called Count Day, where they count the number of services that that domestic violence service providers give in a given day as kind of an example. And they do it nationwide to see how many people are being served by service providers and what isn't being served, right? So in Maryland on Count Day in 2019, there were 976 total services provided. 702 services were beyond hotline calls. 265 were simply hotline calls, right? Of those 702, 421 were supportive services and 281 were shelter services. Okay. Now, if we go on to the next slide, you will see that in just 5 years, that number jumped from just over 900 to over 1,300, with 1,100 services, over 1,100 services beyond hotline as opposed to 700, right? And 580 supportive services and 555 shelter services. So look at that massive increase in shelter services. It went from 421 supportive and 281 shelter. That's a significant difference to being almost equal in terms of what people were provided, right? Now go forward one more slide and you're going to see what happened last year. And Count Day is coming up this year. So those of you who are in domestic violence centers, it's coming up, I believe, on, it's this week. It's either tomorrow or Thursday, the 10th or the 12th. Nope, today's the 9th, today's Tuesday, so maybe it's Friday, Wednesday or Friday. And so last year's Count Day, over 1,400 services were provided by domestic violence service providers, right, in a given day. 212 of those were hotline calls and 1,229 were services beyond the hotline. And for the first year, we see more shelter services provided than supportive services, over 600 of each. So what does that translate to? Well, if you go to the next slide, you'll see the comparison. It is over 47% increase in total services, 75.1% increase in services beyond the hotline. Hotline calls answered numbers were down. Supportive services provided a 45.8% increase, but then look at this. Shelter services provided is 118.9% increase over 2019. That is a ridiculous number. That is more than double. You tell me how many of you have had your shelter staffs double in that same time. If anybody works shelters, if anybody's shelter staff has doubled, I'd love you to raise your hand and tell me about it, because my guess is it hasn't. My guess is you're serving double the people with just about the same amount of people you were before the pandemic hit. So we're doing double the work for the same amount of money, right? So this is a lot. That is a huge, huge jump. Any questions about that? We're going to go to the next slide. And this is the most recent data. We're still waiting for the fiscal year 24 data to come out on protective orders. So 30,000 protective orders requested, 19,000 temporaries granted, over 8,000 final protective orders granted. But you'll notice out of 30,000 originally requested, only 8,500 wind up becoming final protective orders. So that's only a little over 25%. That is not a good number, right? We want to see that number go up much higher, because what it means is people are either dropping the request or they're being rolled against. And that's not good. And Catherine says, why do you think there's been this jump, the jump in need for services? I think there are a couple things. Number one, the pandemic. We know that we all knew. I mean, those of us in intimate partner violence knew when the pandemic hit, we were going to see an increase. Why? Because people were sheltered in place with their abusive partner. They had no break from them. Nobody was going to work. Nobody was leaving the house. There was nothing. And everybody was already anxious because of what was going on in the world. So now you had this, and you're locked in the house with the person who abuses you. So we thought that what would happen is things would go up, and then after things started to get better with the pandemic, it would go back down. We fully expected it. They called it the shadow pandemic, and it's like everybody in our field knew it was going to happen, but the newspapers were just shocked, and we were like, really? Why would you be surprised? But then it was going up and it didn't go down. So we thought, oh, well, it's going to go up and it's going to plateau, right? Like maybe we're just going to, because maybe we're making people more aware, right? No, it has just continued to climb. I am anxious to see what this year's numbers are, to see if we have had any kind of a reduction, because we haven't since 2019. It has been just this constant upward spiral that is just devastating on a day-to-day basis. So, that's the thing. And we think that the pandemic had a lot to do with it. We think that there was a lot of awareness made during the pandemic because of the idea of the shadow pandemic. And I also think that we've tried really hard to do really good outreach. That's part of it. I think that we in the pandemic, we started using things like Zoom. We started using technology more and reaching out in different ways and using social media more. And I think those things have encouraged people to come forward, which is terrific. But all of this is happening while we're flat funded. So it's challenging. Carly says, not just that, literally the sheriffs don't look that hard to serve the papers. And after a certain number of days, it's dropped. Your client even went to the police station to give the exact address where an unemployed guy needed to be served. And Worcester County said, oh, they can't find him. You have to refile if you want us to pursue this again. What? She decided not to refile because it was clear they weren't that motivated. If you run into a situation like that, because that is frustrating, Carly, that is so frustrating. I would highly recommend that you get in touch with us, let us know so we can monitor it. And maybe we can talk to somebody about getting in, talking to the people who serve the papers a little bit about why this is important and how to go about it and keep themselves safe. Yes, there is a lot of IPV in with police relationships, just as there is with any demographic. You're going to see it across all demographics, and police are not an exception to that rule, as Samantha has pointed out. And so we need to train police. And one of the most important things that you need to train police on is that domestic violence situations are the most dangerous situations that police can face, period. It is, that's a fact, right? And we've seen this happen over and over again where police officers are killed responding to domestic violence situations. It is in their best interests to serve these warrants, to serve protective orders, to respond effectively, to do a lap, right? It is in police officers' best interest to follow the advice that we give, because honestly, their lives are more on the line responding to a domestic violence call than they are responding to a bank robbery. And that's important for people to know, right? It's important for our police officers to know. We want them to have our backs, and we want to tell them we have your back. And listen, if you're not trained in this, and if you're not doing it, and if you're not serving protective orders, and you're not following up on warrants, you are putting yourself at risk. Not just the victim, not just the survivor, not just their kids, you. I'm going to go through these questions in order. Linda says, who is advocating for funding in Annapolis? We are. We are absolutely advocating for funding in Annapolis. The Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault advocates for funding in Annapolis. We got, certain things put back in. We actually were very fortunate when the VOCA cuts happened that we had seen that coming, and our, at that time, public policy director, Melanie Shapiro, along with a coalition of people from Women's Law Center, Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault, went in and did our own VOCA fix where the state agreed to pay the difference between what we had been being funded in VOCA the year before and what we would be funded the following year by the feds. The state made up the difference to the tune of some $40 million. Many states did not have the foresight to do that, and they were cut by 2/3 their VOCA budget. So we are constantly advocating for more funding for DOM-V, for VOCA, for VAWA, all the time. And if you have any questions about that, you can always feel free to reach out to me. And then Tara asks, what order is eligible when given a danger assessment in court high? So if somebody is given a lap, right, and they are dangerous, the lethality assessment by the police, they are referred immediately to a domestic violence service provider. Like they try to do a warm handoff right then, right there, so that they can talk to somebody. You start with getting a temporary order, then you can get and then you can get a final order. There's also something called an extreme risk protection order, or an ERPO, which you can apply for, which can remove all of the guns from somebody's home. When we know, especially, that there is high risk. We know that guns are the most often used weapon when committing homicide, domestic violence homicide, to the tune of about 75%, more than 3/4 of all domestic violence homicides are committed with a gun. So that is very important. But it's still the same order until you get to that ERPO. That ERPO is different. Also, you can file a virtual protective order directly from your office without somebody having to go to the courthouse. And so if you have questions about that, please let me know. Hi, Carly. I see your thing. Yes, I understand. I know that this is very frustrating. And I will absolutely provide my contact information. And the virtual protective orders, you can get them. You can literally file, if you're a domestic violence advocate, you have the right to file a virtual protective order directly from the victim can do it directly from working with you. And that's a temporary order. They will have to go to court to get the final protective order, but you can get that interim order right then and there. And that's a start to the process, because if somebody's right in crisis at that moment, trying to get somebody to a courthouse to fill out that paperwork, oh my gosh, it's a lot of paperwork, right? And so having an advocate that can be right there with you to help you fill that out, that can be so helpful. And it can make all the difference between somebody deciding to file for a protective order and deciding not to. And Wendy says, as former law enforcement officer, they're aware that domestic violence are one of the most dangerous calls. That's why there are always at least 2 officers. Yes, it's so dangerous. And, there's been several cases this year nationwide of officers who have been killed responding to domestic violence incidents. So there's a horrible case over in Hawaii on Maui, and it was just terrible. So is there a different order that's available that's instantly given when a dangerous? No, there is not, Tara. There is not a different order. All right. Okay, great questions. We're going to keep moving on, but keep those questions coming. So we do a memorial service every year. And this was our 36th annual memorial service. You saw that 38. What we did is we showed total domestic violence deaths over the last 5 years. And you can see we did have a surge of fatalities during the pandemic. The numbers have thankfully gone back down, but nearly 40 deaths is still too much. You can go to the next slide. So this was the one for 2023. The 2024 numbers will be coming out next month, and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. But you can see 74% of the deaths were caused by a gun. If we go to the next slide, this was the 5-year comparison. Whitney Adele, who is our amazing prevention coordinator, took 5 years of data and really looked into it and saw where numbers were going and where trends were. And, you can see those really high numbers in 2020, 2021, 2022, and then we finally came back down in 2023. In 2024, we did as well. But you're still at some really high numbers, and you're looking at people who were killed are not just the victims, the people who were in the relationship with the abusive partner, but that you had 40 bystanders killed and 50 perpetrators, because there's been a huge trend of murder-suicides, where the perpetrator has murdered their spouse, their partner, sometimes their children, and then taken their own life. And that has been a very steady trend that we have seen here. And it's about 38% of our cases appear to be murder-suicides. So this just gives you more information broken down by county, by the offender relationship. And there's that statistic on murder-suicides, right? It's a lot. It's a lot. And over the course of 5 years, 75% of IPV related deaths were due to guns. You also notice the primary lethality factors. One of the top lethality factors is that somebody has left the relationship. So when people say things like, why don't they just leave? Well, survivors know what's dangerous. And sometimes staying is less lethal than leaving. So that is definitely a lethality factor. Previous history, being pregnant is a lethality factor. Non-fatal strangulation is a lethality factor, because any strangulation can lead to death. So yeah, there's a lot of different factors that are involved. But the one that is really easiest to track is the fact that the victim had left. Next slide, please. Here are the key statistics, all in one place, that Whitney put together. 36.3% of IPV homicides also resulted in suicide or attempted suicide by the perpetrator. Women make up 88.7% of all intimate partner deaths. Black women are dying from intimate partner violence at nearly 5 times their proportion in the state population. I want you to take a moment and think about that statistic. Black women are dying at a rate nearly 5 times their proportion in the population. That's a problem. 69% of fatalities where known lethal factors existed occurred after the victim left. There's your total IPV fatalities, and then 75% were committed with a gun. So here are the key takeaways. IPV is a pattern of behavior to control someone in a relationship through economic, emotional, physical, psychological, sexual, or technological means. It affects marginalized populations disproportionately, though anyone can be a victim. and service providers are continuously being asked to do more. I want everybody to take a minute. This has been really heavy. I want you to just kind of take a moment, kind of shake it out, maybe stretch a little bit, roll your shoulders. You know, if you have to stand up and walk around a little bit, that's okay. Maybe get a drink of water and just take a deep breath, because we're going to go on. And now we're really going to start delving into this relationship, this intersection of intimate partner violence and sexual assault. And what exactly does that look like? So, defining intimate partner violence and sexual assault, Venn diagram, IPV, sexual violence, where they come together. It's any sexual contact or activity with an intimate partner that makes a person feel uncomfortable when the purpose is to control through threats, fear, coercion, or manipulation of violence. Okay? So you don't actually have to commit a violent act. You can threaten the violent act. And if that's enough, that they're controlling you through those threats, through that fear, that sexual activity, they're making you do that through threat, through fear, through manipulation, that is intimate partner sexual violence. So when you look at the next slide, you'll see that I want to talk a little bit about what are some similarities and differences between sexual assault and intimate partner sexual violence. What do you think if somebody comes to you and they've experienced a sexual assault from somebody they did not know, somebody they never met, or maybe they just was an acquaintance, as opposed to somebody that is an intimate partner, maybe somebody they live with? What do you think are some similarities? Let's talk about the similarities first. What are the similarities between sexual assault from a non-intimate partner and sexual assault from an intimate partner? So let's start with similarities. I'm putting that in the chat. What are some of the similarities? You can also feel free to come off mute and just say it. Just having unwanted sex, right? That's just playing out. That's still what it is. It's the loss of control. Yep. Thank you, Alexia and Kelly. Anxiety, says Grace. Imposition, says Sarah. Yep. Scared. Yep. Absolutely. Both of them can cause you to have trauma, right? They're both traumatic.
There's no consent for both.
Huh?
There is no consent.
No consent, right. Both of them are not consensual. They can both be life-threatening. You can freeze in both of them, Sarah says. Samantha says trauma, yep. Unwanted and saying no. Oh, Catherine, yes, it's not their fault. Either way, whether they know the person, don't know the person, they're both going to cause triggers. They're both going to cause crisis. Yes, you are so on this. Yep. So now let's think about, PTSD, sleep issues, unsolicited, crying and angry. Yep. All the things that you see with trauma, they're both traumatic, right? What are the differences? What are some differences, do you think, between somebody who has experienced a sexual assault from somebody that was a stranger or maybe an acquaintance, as opposed to somebody who was an intimate partner? What might some of the differences be? They both can be an inroad to infectious diseases. Psychological awareness of what will harm their partner the most. Yes, Isabella, knowing somebody means you know their strengths and their weaknesses. Feeling of isolation if they report the person they know, right? And especially if you're in a marginalized community, right? Where people already have, say, oh, if you're in the 2S LGBTQI plus community, there's already a negative thought process. So if you report somebody in the community, you're taking down the community, right? Same thing if you're BIPOC, right? With the one-time thing, it seems in some ways easier to deal with and move on, even forget on a daily basis, versus IPV where you're looking over your shoulder. Yeah, sometimes it might be, I don't know if it's necessarily easier, but it's different, right? Because you're constantly going to be with that person. Somebody said, I just saw it go past. I'm going to go back up to see who said it. Trauma bonded. Laurel, yes, Laurel, you're trauma bonded. So you may not want to report it. You may not even want to leave the person. You may just want it to stop. because you loved the person. You got into the relationship for a reason. You cared about them, right? So you may not want the person to go to jail. You may not want the person to be arrested. You just want them to stop hurting. Feeling trapped because they're in the relationship, so they may feel they have even less power than before. Yes, Kelly, being embarrassed, right? Like, how could you get into a relationship like that? Why, again, why didn't they just leave? IPSVs are more likely to think they deserved it because they agreed to the relationship, maybe even think it's part of the relationship. Especially if you saw growing up, if you were the child in a relation, in an intimate way, who had parents who had a domestic violence relationship, you can be put into a place where you are molded, right? To think this is just the way it is. Victims take ownership of the assault if they know the person's safety levels. If it's partner, yeah, the partner has constant access, right? It's not like you can move and the person won't know where you live or anything. That's the person feeling trapped or bound to an abuser if they share children. You don't love the person anymore. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the thing that broke your love. Sharon, believing nobody will believe you, right? Well, you're married. Of course you had sex. No, that's not having sex. There was no consent. I was raped. That is different. I mean, think about it. It was only a few years ago that marital rape was officially a crime in this state, right? Up until 2 years ago, marital rape was not illegal in Maryland. Tara says it never ends. It's going to keep happening. That is exactly it. Until somehow the cycle is broken, it's going to keep happening. Great. Wow, you all are just so on top of it. Let's go ahead and go on then, and let's talk about some of the things that make part of intimate partner sexual violence. It could be forced nudity, forcing the person to walk around the house with no clothes on, forcing them to view pornography, sexual degradation, forcing them to do things they don't want to do or that they find sexually degrading, sexual regulation and monitoring. Sometimes it can be hard to think about this, but forced inspection of undergarments, regulating their partner's clothing, telling them what they can and cannot wear, right? They can't wear panties. They have to wear this. That type of thing can be really, really painful. Reproductive coercion, and that is in purple because we are going to go into a whole section on reproductive coercion. Unsafe sex practices, right? Forcing the person to have sex without a condom when they know the person has an STI. Unwanted sexual touching. And then, of course, any unwanted vaginal, oral, or anal intercourse. And you have to understand this forcing does not have to mean physically forcing. It's creating a feeling, situation, or atmosphere where emotional and physical control can lead to sexual abuse, rape, or victim fearing they have no choice but to submit, right? I heard somebody once said about marital rape, and they say marital rape is not as bad as stranger rape. I don't know. I've never been raped by a stranger, but I think being raped by your husband in your own home must be worse in some ways. At least if you're attacked by a perfect stranger, it is not so personal. Your husband is the person whom you should be able to turn to for comfort, who should protect you. When the person you have entrusted your life to abuses you, it isn't just physical or sexual assault. It is a betrayal of the very core of your marriage or your person, your trust. If you're not safe in your own home, next to your husband, where are you safe? And that is a really powerful quote when you think about how, when we talk about that difference, right? So we're going to go, marital rape is very hard to prove in court, Tara. It is, but at least it's now illegal. It's easy. Yeah, it's easy to make excuses for a partner. The entire reporting process feels insurmountable a lot. Yeah. Reporting is so hard and it's so personal. And that's why we have to look at why so many people choose not to report. They may not want to report because they may just want the person to change. They may not want to report because they may know that in their community, reporting can be very dangerous to both the survivor and to the perpetrator. So there's a lot of reasons why people might not report, and we have to respect that, right? All right, next slide. We're going to really delve into reproductive coercion here, because reproductive coercion is really one of the main ways you see this crossover between intimate partner violence and sexual violence. So reproductive coercion is using reproductive health to maintain power and control in a current or former intimate partner relationship. And so we go on to the next slide. There are many different types of reproductive coercion. There's pregnancy pressure, threatening to get them pregnant, making them feel guilty for not wanting to become pregnant, accusing them of infidelity if they do not want to get pregnant. There's birth control sabotage, hiding, throwing away, destroying birth control, non-consensual condom removal, which is called stealthing, poking holes in condoms, pulling out IUDs or contraceptive devices, right? And then there's pregnancy outcome control, forcing them to continue or to terminate a pregnancy, physically assaulting them in an attempt to induce a miscarriage, and making them feel guilty for wanting an abortion. We know that pregnancy absolutely positively raises the incidence of domestic violence. If you are already in a domestic violence relationship, it is very often going to get more violent during pregnancy. Even if the person wants the child, even if the abusive partner wants the child, but it also is a lethality factor. So you need to be really aware of this, especially this pregnancy outcome control. Next slide, please. So here are some statistics. In the United States, 9.7% of men, 8.4% of women have experienced reproductive coercion by an intimate partner during their lifetime. 40% of women who have been exposed to abuse report having an unintended pregnancy, compared to 8% of non-abused women. That is a huge, huge jump, right? That is 5 times as often. Also want to point out that when we're talking about these statistics, research on reproductive coercion and people who are transgender or non-binary is extremely limited. And people of all genders can experience reproductive coercion in IPV. There aren't numbers on everything. So we just want you to be aware of that. According to the National Crime Victimization Survey, approximately 1 in 5 young women said they experienced pregnancy coercion, and 1 in 7 said they experienced active interference with contraception. And that's kind of a scary statistic. And in a local study, 37.8% of young self-identified Black women in Baltimore reported experiencing reproductive coercion. That's over 1 in 3. So again, that's a huge number, and that's a local study right here in our very own state. So going on to the next slide, we're going to look at, excuse me, some of the tactics of abuse and reproductive coercion. So physical and sexual abuse, sexually assaulting somebody to get them pregnant, right? Coercing them into unprotected sex. Oh, baby, if you really loved me, you wouldn't make me wear a condom. You know, you're the only one I'm seeing. I don't have any diseases. I promise I'll pull out, right? Using physical violence to force someone to continue a pregnancy or have an abortion, right? So either hitting them, kicking them, sometimes punching them in the stomach if they want them to get rid of the baby, sometimes hitting them in other places if they want to keep the baby, but making sure that they know that they're in control. Emotional abuse, threatening violence if they do not choose the pregnancy outcome that the perpetrator wants, threatening to out them for obtaining an abortion. Fortunately, in our state, abortion is legal and is enshrined in our Constitution for a woman's right to choose. But that doesn't mean that she would want everyone to know that she had an abortion. So even though it's not illegal here, some people, it's a very personal, private decision. And threatening to out somebody like that could really, really damage them. And using religious or cultural beliefs to coerce somebody and manipulate them into choosing a certain pregnancy outcome. God's going to punish you if you do this. God doesn't believe in abortion. This is, abortion is wrong, that type of thing. Or, God, you don't need to carry this baby. There's nothing that says that you have to. Your religion doesn't ban this. It goes both ways. Possible solution, Carly says, could we eventually get it legislated that accusations of IPV-DV remain on someone's case search file, even if it was unable to be proven? At least that way women could look up potential suitors and see a paper trail, interpret that as red flags. Alexis says, having a series of accusations as a paper trail would have made a difference, I think, for a lot of people I know, but I wonder what protections we would have to make sure attached so that those who report are protected, even anonymized. Yeah. Because we know the state is limited in providing protection to vulnerable people. It's true. And I think the main reason why there aren't lists like that is that if somebody wanted to really hurt someone, that would be a way to do it. And abusive partners could use that very same paper trail. I mean, we know abusive partners accuse the victim of being the criminal, right? That's why we try to teach, police. Who's I have my former police officer in here, where we teach primary aggressor, right? Don't make dual arrests. This is not a dual arrest situation, right? We know that there are things that will help you see who the primary aggressor is. And so police being trained on primary aggressor is so important, because if you ever want to know how important it is to be trained on primary aggressor, have any of you ever seen any of the body cam footage from the stop that was made by the police in the Gabby Petito Brian Laundrie case? Give me a thumbs up or something if you've seen any of that footage. I will tell you, you should see it. You should also plan to watch it with somebody, and you should plan some very serious self-care for afterwards, because it is incredibly disturbing. Because had those officers had proper training in the lab, it is very possible Gabby Petito might still be alive. They 100% missed every single sign. Anybody who had been trained in neurobiology of trauma would have known. The person who is shaking, who is crying, who is guzzling water like they are in a desert and hadn't seen it for 3 days, who cannot complete a full sentence, is your victim. The guy who is standing cool as a cucumber, leaning against the back of the truck, casually talking to the cops, who refuses the bottle of water they offer him in the desert, is your perpetrator. That is neurobiology of trauma 101. And if anybody has seen that video, you know exactly those of you who have seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we have to be aware, right, of those things. And when you look at that and you look at, why don't, the paper trails and things like this, and we have to be careful about that, right? we have to determine who that primary aggressor is. And then finally, economic abuse is another tactic of reproductive coercion. Refusing to pay for birth control or for an abortion. Refusing to help pay for prenatal care if the person is keeping the child. Forcing pregnancy or birth within a short time frame to keep them from working. So like if you meet somebody and they immediately want you to get pregnant, oh my word, danger, danger, Will Robinson, danger. And I'm probably just lost like 99% of you because you're not old enough to get that reference. But that is a major red flag, right? That wanting you to get pregnant right away, that is such a form of control, right? So you see that the tactics are wide and they are varied. And basically for an abusive partner, it's all the tools in the toolkit. And as they get to know their partner better and better, they're going to know which one of these is going to work, right? Somebody said that earlier. Your partner knows you. They know what emotional abuse is. They know which buttons to press. So if we can go to the next slide, please. You're going to see that there really is a cycle of pregnancy and IPV. Unplanned pregnancy can lead to IPV and abuse, and IPV and abuse can lead to unplanned pregnancy. Either one can trigger the other. So when we talk about pregnancy, intimate partner violence, and reproductive justice, keep in mind that many survivors will choose to remain pregnant and give birth, even if it was the result of IPV, sexual assault, or reproductive coercion. We need to be ready to support the survivor, whether or not they have an abortion, whether or not they have a child, and whether or not they stay with the abusive partner while they are pregnant. So we're going to go to the next slide, and there's a video here that I want you to see, and then we'll talk about it a little bit afterwards.
Hi, I'm Lisa, your clinician. How are you doing today?
Kind of nervous, actually. Just, waiting on the test results.
Well, I ran the test. Can you tell me what you're hoping the outcome will be?
Well, I'm still in college, so What were the results?
Alicia, the pregnancy test is positive.
Oh, God.
I can see this isn't the result that you wanted.
I actually took a test at home. I was hoping it was wrong.
I'm sorry that this isn't the news that you wanted. Is there someone that you can talk about this with who's supportive?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, so Alicia, before I get into your options, does the person who got you pregnant know that you're here today?
No.
Will you share the test results with him? Is he still in your life?
He's my boyfriend. He's actually, he thinks I might be pregnant, and he's actually really excited. But I'm not ready to be a mom.
That kind of disagreement can make it really difficult to decide what to do.
Tell me about it.
Have you two been together long?
About a year.
Not being in the same place about a decision like this can be really stressful. Are you planning on telling him?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, in terms of making a decision, according to your last period, you're still early in your pregnancy. So that gives you time to think about your options and make a decision, whether to keep the pregnancy and be a mom, go with adoption, or have an abortion.
I really wish I didn't have to think about any of this.
Yeah, I really understand. Are you afraid of what will happen when you tell him?
Why? I want to have an abortion. But I think he'll lose his mind if he finds out. I've actually kind of been going back and forth about whether or not to tell him.
Well, what does that look like, going out of his mind?
He literally told me if I find out that you killed my baby, I'll kill you.
Alicia, this is really scary. Has he ever hurt you physically in the past?
No, he's just crazy jealous, and he really wants to have a baby with me.
Do you think he got you pregnant on purpose?
I don't know. I can't. I feel so stupid about all this. He told me that if I got on birth control, it would make me fat. And he just wanted to use condoms. And I didn't want him to think I was fat, so I didn't get on the birth control. And then he pulled the condom off, or it fell off, or whatever. And I mean, I've taken emergency contraception a few times, but I don't know. I guess I just missed a couple.
I'm really sorry you have to go through all this, Alicia. Is this something that you can share with friends and family?
No. No, I'm too embarrassed. I mean, I know better. I'm not supposed to be in this kind of relationship.
Alicia, all kinds of women at different points in their lives find themselves in this situation. I'm not an expert in controlling or abusive relationships, but I know someone who is. Would it be okay if I called my colleague Debbie? She can help you develop a safety plan, think about next steps. She's helped a lot of women in your situation. She can come here to the clinic if that's what you want to do, or you can even talk to her on the phone.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to talk to her.
Thank you for trusting me with your story. For now, I want you to get support and be safe so that you can make the choice that's right for you, not out of fear of what your partner will do. Hi, Debbie. It's Lisa from the clinic. I have a client here, Alicia, who has some things she wants to go over with you. You have time now? Great. Hold on one sec.
Hi. Debbie?
Tony, it looks like you're muted.
I can't hear you.
Sorry. Thinking about this video, what do you think? What do you think about it? What do you think about how the clinician handled it, and the things that the clinician said to Alicia? Love the warm handoff. Yes. I huge fan of the warm handoff, validating her feelings, gave her resources. Yep. I mean, felt very, that validation, warm handoff. We know that's best practices, really empowered. Alicia's already experienced form of abuse. She was able to pick up on that. She was very calm. The clinician really did leave. Kayla says, left the conversation open for her to make her own decision. She said, listen, I know somebody who's an expert in this who can help you make the decision, decide on next steps. Didn't say anything about what those next steps were, right? Powerful that one of the last things she said was about making a decision that's not based out of fear of manipulation. Yep. She was really concerned. Loved how she thanked her for trusting her with her story. I mean, these are all things. I'm sure many of you would do the same thing if you were in that situation, right? These are the things. You're going to do warm handoffs. That's an absolute best practice. You give somebody a phone number, there's a chance they're not even going to make the call. And if the person doesn't answer right away, the chance that they're going to call back is probably zero, right? Yeah, she didn't say anything definitive. You should do this, you should do that. No, she was like, I'm just telling you, I'm giving you information. What are the elements of a warm handoff? Catherine asks. Great question. So I always say you should know who you're going to hand somebody off to before the person is sitting in front of you. So for example, you could see the clinician here. She already knew somebody at a domestic violence center, right? So if she's the person who she knows who she's going to call, So the elements of a warm handoff are knowing who the resource is, right? So let's say that somebody tells you, they come into you as the advocate, and you're having this conversation and they say, I think I might be pregnant. I think my partner got me pregnant on purpose. I'm really scared. You shouldn't have to go like Googling to find out where the closest health clinic is. You should know that. You should have a book that has all of these resources and referrals in it. And you should have called them beforehand. Make a friend there. Make your Debbie, right? So that if you call the clinic, you're not saying, I'm going to just hand you off to somebody. You can call Debbie and be like, hey, Debbie, this is Tony calling from MNADV. I have somebody here who's going to need to talk to you. Do cross trainings with other agencies like health clinics so that they're aware of what domestic violence looks like, because then they can refer to you, you can refer to them. It is a win-win situation, right? So doing cross trainings, knowing who those people are ahead of time, and then doing the warm handoff. You see how she did it right there? She was like, I can give you the referral, or I could even call her right now. And number one, she gave Alicia the choice. But when Alicia was like, yeah, I'd like to talk to her, she's like, I'm going to call her. She's Debbie. Hi, I have somebody. Do you have time right now? Great. Here is the phone. Because when you do that warm handoff, they know that it's somebody you know. They know it's somebody you trust. And if they trusted you enough to tell you their story because you had that tone and everything like the nurse clinician had, they're going to trust that person on the other end of the line more, right? And you're going to be able to get them the help that they need. If you're just like, here's the number for the health clinic, who knows what's going to happen, right? And so that's why warm handoffs are so, so important, both ways, coming to you and going from you. So I always encourage you, get to know the people you're going to hand off to. If you need health information, if you need legal information, whatever information you might be referring somebody to, it shouldn't just be a phone number. It should be a person at that phone number. That's best practices. I hope that helped, Catherine. So what do you do as an advocate? Recognizing reproductive coercion as intimate partner violence. Yes, Kayla says it's important to do it while you're in it because they're susceptible to manipulation and doubt when leaving. Absolutely. And even after they talk to the person, they might, but every time you have somebody who validates them, who is calm, who treats them with respect, who gives them options, that is one step closer, right, to getting them to safety. So you want to screen for reproductive coercion. Do you have questions when you do intake that might bring this up? If you don't, you want to. You want to empower survivors and educate them. You saw how empowering the clinician was, right? She gave her options, she gave her choices. And we know that when you've had your power and control taken from you, having even the simplest choices can be so empowering. You want to educate them. Let them know what their options are. You don't tell them what they're going to do. You notice she said, we can, have you thought about, do you want to have the baby and be a mom? Do you want to, have the baby and place it for adoption? Or do you want to have an abortion? There are multiple options. So you want to educate the survivors. They have choices. In our state, we are lucky. We have all three choices. In some states, they don't. You want to provide safety planning. Safety plan, safety plan, safety plan. Safety is the top priority. Give them resources. If you have resources, give your resources out in places so people know they can come from you. And then promote internal organizational changes. What if you don't have anything on your intake form that screens for reproductive coercion, or on a secondary intake, like maybe once somebody starts to talk to somebody a little more in depth? How do you do that? How do you make that look? What does that warm handoff policy look like? Do you have a book that has all that information in it? And do you know the people? Are you given time to meet the people that you need to meet in order to develop these relationships? Everything here is better for the survivor, and advocating for that should always be something that you can do. And if you need help advocating for it, I'm always willing to help advocate for it, because anything we can do to make a survivor feel more at home, more comfortable, more willing to look at options, and definitely more ability to be safe is a win. So if you have any questions about talking with survivors, nope, you can go ahead and go on. Here are some screening questions that you can use. Has your partner ever tried to get you pregnant when you did not want to be pregnant? That's a simple screening question. Are you worried your partner will hurt you if you do not become pregnant, or if you do become pregnant? Remember, reproductive coercion can go both ways. Has your partner ever made you have sex without using birth control? Has your partner ever made you have sex when you did not want to? Right? These are really important screening questions. You should have some of these on your screenings, your intakes. So what else do you have to consider? Well, safety planning, again, always safety top priority. Transportation. What if they want to get an abortion, but they don't drive? What if they want to go to prenatal care, but their partner won't pay for it? Transportation and financial assistance. Childcare. What if they already have children and they need to go to a doctor, right? Can you help provide that? And what are available contraceptive options? There are many, many contraceptive options. Reviewing all of them and finding out what's safe for them and what might work for them is really important. But in order to do that, you're going to have to familiarize yourself with it. Tara says, are these questions only relevant in the moment of someone whom is pregnant, or would you be able to apply this to past pregnancy situations? Yes, I would absolutely. If you ask somebody, has your partner ever tried to get you pregnant when you did not want to become pregnant? That is not just right now, because right now they might be seeing you because their partner slapped them or hit them or kicked them or strangled them. But if you ask this question and they're like, yeah, my partner's always talking about wanting to have a baby with me, and I know that a couple times he slipped off the condom, or yeah, I had to take the morning after pill because I didn't want to be pregnant. Yeah, that can apply to the past pregnancy. That's going to let you know that, remember, again, this is a lethality issue. Pregnancy control is a lethality issue. Because if the person gets pregnant when they don't want them to, or doesn't get pregnant when they do want them to, or tries to terminate a pregnancy when they don't want them to, that can be really dangerous. Great questions. All right, let's go forward. So, safety planning considerations. Cultural relevancy. You have to consider so that the survivor's cultural background, their religion, their culture might have very strong feelings about abortion one way or another. So that is a really difficult conversation to have with somebody, and you're giving options if their religion has very strictly said no, and that is part of their culture, right? So you really need to consider that when you're talking to them in your safety planning, because if they know that their partner wants to get them pregnant, and they know that they don't want to get pregnant, but they know that if they do, they won't have an abortion because of their culture, you have to think about what are the ways we can safety plan. Birth control, emergency contraception. You want to think about pregnancy testing. Where can they safely test, right? So that their partner won't know. STI testing and notification. So if the partner is, say is stealthing and takes off the condom without them knowing, and somebody's, concerned because they figured out their partner did this, pregnancy isn't the only concern. The person could have a sexually transmitted infection, right? So that's important. How do you plan for transportation? If they're still in the relationship, where are they going to say they're going? Do they need financial assistance in order to do the things that they want to do, whether it is having the child or taking, or having an abortion, right? So that's really, really important. And so, you need to make sure about all these things that, is there birth control at a safe pharmacy, right? Do you have pregnancy tests on site at your agencies, right? If they're staying with their partner and they find out that they have an STI, how do they talk to their partner about it, right? So there's a lot of different things that you have to consider. So this is a really great video on safety planning in action. I'd like you to take a look.
So Lori, maybe you remember me from last night. I'm Lee, and this is Ruth. And if it's okay with you, I'd like Ruth to stay and listen and learn while we finish your intake. Would it be all right if she stays? Or if it's not, that's fine. Just let us know.
No, it's okay. That's fine.
So, how are you doing? I heard your kids are having a great time making art in the playroom.
They didn't want me to go at first, but then they got comfortable. I told them I would keep checking on them.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And if you feel like you need to jump up and check, that is totally not a problem. We can come back to this later, too. We're just trying to help in whatever way you all need support.
Thanks.
Okay. So, I know we started some paperwork with you last night, and we have just a little more to go over with you today. Basically, we talk to everyone who comes in about this. We give them this little card that talks about some of the other ways that a partner might try to control or hurt you in a relationship. Sometimes it's about your reproductive health. Many women who come to our program have experienced situations putting them at risk for unplanned pregnancies. And we want you to know there is a safe medication that you can take called emergency contraception. Some call it EC, or the morning after pill. You take it up to 5 days after unprotected sex to prevent pregnancy, if that's something that would be useful for you. Now, emergency contraception is available if you had unprotected sex without condoms or any form of birth control in the past 5 days, you had a condom break, get pulled off, or fallen off in the last 5 days, you've forgotten to take your birth control pills or change your NuvaRing or contraceptive patch in the last 5 days, or you're worried that your partner was trying to get you pregnant when you didn't want to be, messing with or damaging your birth control, like not pulling out when he said he would, or poking holes in your diaphragm. Now, are any of these things a concern for you today, or something you want more information about? Is EC or a pregnancy test something that would be useful for you today?
Actually, I was kind of freaking out about having left my pills at home by mistake. I really don't want to get pregnant right now.
Right. It totally makes sense that stuff you really need sometimes gets left behind. Actually, we have a public health nurse, Liz, that we work with, and she could easily bring pills over to the shelter today. So you don't have to go home to get them. And she can talk with you more about EC. Liz or any of our advocates can also talk with you about some of the things on the card in more depth. Methods of birth control out there that in the future your partner doesn't have to know about and you can control.
Thanks. Thanks for asking. If it's okay, can I go check on the kids now?
No problem. So, what did you think about what you saw?
I think she looked relieved to have information and to get her pills. And I see how you kind of kept to the facts. I like that.
Okay, so circle back around if you have other questions on this or other stuff comes up. But your experience is one that really many staff have had to work through, but once they did, they realized that starting a conversation about emergency contraception was really helpful for the woman that we were working with, not something that was a burden.
Thanks.
And I want to shout out Futures Without Violence because they're amazing and they're the ones who have made these videos. Let's see, Alexa says, I do appreciate the information, but I do wish there was think time cushioned in for people who need more time to process information, especially for yes or no questions. A lot of people tend to say yes off of instinct without really taking into account what they want. Yeah, and I think that it's important. There are some things that, of course, are time sensitive, Alexis. So, like taking emergency contraception. So you have to ask those things right away. But there are ways to say them. And I think sometimes leaving questions to be more open-ended can be really helpful. So asking, how would you feel if you found out you were pregnant right now? That requires thought, right? You have to think about that. That's not a yes or no question. That's really open-ended. And that might be hard for somebody in crisis to answer, but it's also important, right? So that's a really good point. Yeah. Alexis, you said you don't mean for days, just a couple extra seconds. Absolutely. And you said you say this is an autistic person. Everybody needs it, not just people who are autistic. When you are talking about being pregnant, even if you get pregnant in the greatest of situations, pregnancy is a major stressor. And talking about it is stressful. When you're still, even good stress is stress. So taking time is never the wrong thing, right? Letting somebody have a few seconds, having somebody process, saying to them, take your time to think about what I'm going to ask you. You don't have to give me an answer right off the bat. Takes a few moments to think about it. Here is why it is so important that we're screening for not just reproductive coercion, but all forms of intimate partner sexual violence. Prior intimate partner sexual violence increases the likelihood of intimate partner homicide by 544%. That is a huge difference. And you're probably sitting there going, why are there two dogs on this slide? Well, number one, that's a really heavy statistic, and dogs, puppies, cute, maybe make you feel warm and fuzzy. But also, it is a very specific slide. The big dog is 544% bigger than the little dog. 544% is something that's hard to visualize when you just hear a number. But I want you to look at that visual. Look at the Bernese Mountain Dog. Look at the Puggle. That is a big difference in dog size. That's 544%, right? Because that number, it's hard to imagine what that number looks like. I am giving you a visual of what that number looks like, right? Some of you may want 544% of a dog. Some of you may just want the dog, right? So big difference. And it's important that you see that. Next slide, please. Key takeaways. I always like to give these, so, a little reminder, because we've been through a lot. Intimate partner sexual violence can take many forms, but the purpose is to control the victim, period. Reproductive coercion is a frequent form of IPSV, and it is a strong indicator of danger of lethality. All right, so let's go into this final section here. Best practices, right? What are we going to do? We're not going to dismiss it. A new study showed that women who talked about intimate partner sexual violence with domestic violence service providers felt dismissed. They needed providers to take their disclosures seriously. And this is a really recent study, 2024. They understood that psychological abuse is an important part of IPSV, and they need practitioners to see that this is all part of a bigger pattern. right? And they need you to counteract the gaslighting, to address the silencing of intimate partner sexual violence. They want you to help them identify it, because many of them wouldn't identify it themselves because he's my husband. I'm expected to have sex with him, right? So it's really important. I encourage you, I give you the site for this. I encourage you highly to read this article. I was shocked when I read it. So this is really important information, and it's a brand new study. This is some of the newest stuff coming out about intimate partner sexual violence. Don't minimize that disclosure. Next slide, please. So screening questions, we already talked about reproductive coercion, but these are initials. Has your partner ever pressured or forced you into doing something sexually you didn't want to do? Do you feel you can say no to sexual activity with your partner? Have you ever been intimate with your partner because you were afraid of them? Or have you ever given in to a sexual encounter with your partner to avoid fighting or being hurt? So those are some initial questions to get the conversation going. If you go on to the next slide, you'll look and you'll see that there are some follow-up questions. How often does that occur? Are there patterns that you notice? What would happen if you told them you did not want to do something? How often does that occur? That lets you know whether it's a pattern, right? Is this something that's happened multiple times, or is it something that's happened once? If it's the first time, you know it's going to happen again, right? But if it's multiple times, you can show the pattern. Are there patterns you notice? It happens every Thursday night when he comes home from playing poker, right? It only happens when the kids are not here. So like when they go to grandma's for a sleepover. What would happen if you told them you didn't want to do that? That lets you know. If they say no, what is going to happen to them? Are they going to be coerced? Are they going to be hit? Are they going to be isolated? What is their punishment? This is a difficult question. Can you tell me some of the things they force you to do as their partner? This is not something you want to ask someone you have just met. But when you are exploring this further, this is something you need to know. Because if they are forcing them to do certain things, they may need to go get a medical checkup, right? And what do you think would happen if you told them you were in pain? This is going to tell you the level of psychological abuse, whether they care whether their partner is in pain, how they react to their partner being in pain. Next slide, please. So there's some general questions. These are ones you know, you probably say these all the time. How can I help you? You heard the clinician in the first video, the one with Alicia. She used this, when you say, what do you mean by that? She said, what does that look like when you say he's really going to be out of control, or he's really going to lose control, right? What does that mean, right? That's really vague. Does lose control mean he's going to scream and yell? Does it mean he's going to throw things? Does it mean he's going to hit you? Those are different things. Can you tell me more about that? Always the greatest open-ended question ever. Tell me more about that. And can we talk about who you might be able to confide in? Do they have somebody that they can talk to? Can you tell them that their friends might still be there for them, even though they really feel like they've ruined their friendships because the abusive partner wouldn't let them contact them? Okay. Next slide. Tips and guiding principles. Important information. Acknowledge the difficulty of the situation. Believe them. I think we all know that one. Be prepared for any reaction. Remember, to them, you might be part of the system, and the system may have let them down in the past when they tried to report this or do something about it. So be prepared for any reaction, from crying to numbness to screaming at you, which means you're considering trauma, right? You're considering trauma reactions. Keep the conversation open and empathize. Don't sympathize, right? There's a great Brene Brown video on the difference between empathy and sympathy. If you haven't seen it, look it up on YouTube. It's awesome. Empathizing is connecting with their emotions and seeing where they're at and seeing how you can help them. Sympathy is like, oh, that's bad. I'm so sorry, right? A sympathetic person, when somebody dies, oh, it's so bad. They drop off a casserole. The empathetic person comes by 3 weeks after the person has died, because that's when nobody else is there, and says, hey, do you just need to talk? Do we see the difference there? Not that dropping off a casserole is a bad thing. And I just gave away my Midwest because I'm a casserole person. But casseroles are good things, but dropping by 3 weeks later is also a good thing. And take it slow, step by step. Let them lead. You're there to guide them, not lead them, right? And most important, and this is the hardest thing in the world to do, respect their choices, even if they are staying with the abuser. Survivors are the experts in their own lives. They know when it is safest for them to leave. And if they don't feel like they can leave, don't try to force it. Safety plan what they can do to stay with the abuser, and try to draw a line in the sand that says, if X happens, you will leave. Can you tell me what would make you leave? Where is the point where you would be like, I've had enough. I can't do it anymore. Does that all make sense? I know it's a lot to ask. It's really a lot to ask. Next slide, please.
For a woman to leave an abusive partner, it takes an average of 7 attempts. For many victims, the only hope of leaving is women's refuge. Without you, that hope doesn't exist. Please donate at womensrefuge.org.nz.
That's you. You are the refuge. You are the people, and you have to understand, why do people stay and how can you help when they do, so that you can get them to that point where they're ready to leave. Yeah, Janelle, it is intense. It's a minute, it's less than a minute and 30 seconds, but it totally shows you that how that person feels in that moment. Like there's the part that wants to leave and there's the part that's drawn back, and you hear the things. What kind of tactics did that abusive partner use? What kind of tactics were they using in there? What were some of the tactics? Manipulation, shame, right? I'm breaking up the family. Fear, yep, I'm on my way, right? Blame, yep. In a minute and 20 seconds. All of that in a minute and 20 seconds. Imagine that that's somebody's life, right? So Why do people stay? Well, they stay because of all those reasons. So how can you help? How do you help? What do you do when somebody isn't ready to leave? What can you do when they are simply not ready to leave yet? Remain patient. Yes. I don't know if it's Tara or Tara. I apologize if I'm pronouncing it wrong. But yes, absolutely. Remain patient. Tara. Okay. Thank you. People's names are important. Yeah, it's hard. Show them you are there for them. That's right, Sarah. You want them to know that you're going to be there, even if they, whatever decision they make. Because if you don't let them know that, when they are thinking about leaving again, they're going to be too afraid to call you if you make them feel guilty or shame them, right? That's what they're feeling in the relationship. They don't need that from you, right? Help them with what you can. Absolutely. Safety plan, safety plan, safety plan. Don't judge them. Yes, Kayla, it could lead to further isolation from reaching out. Absolutely. You all got this. You all understand this. I hope that this has been helpful for you to maybe see some of these things that you might not have seen before and maybe get some resources and ideas to help you kind of plan ahead for if you have somebody come into your center with this type of issue, right? Because this is really intense. I think that is absolutely true. It gets really intense. When you think about it, let them know you will still be there for them should they change their mind. Absolutely. So I'm sure you have all heard the phrase, meet the survivor where they're at. If you've heard that phrase, can I get a thumbs up or something in the chat? Give me a thumbs up if you have heard the phrase, meet the survivor where they're at. Have you heard that? Let me see. I've got some thumbs up coming. Yeah, you've heard that. Do any of you know that there's a second half to that phrase? Has anybody been on another one of my trainings? What's the second half, Faith? Meet the survivor where they're at, but what is the second half to that phrase? Don't leave them there. Meet the survivor where they're at, but don't leave them there. Every time you meet them, inch them forward. It might not be a big leap to where you need it to be for them to leave, but they're not going to be where they were. And every time you move them forward, I have to give credit to Freedom Network Training Institute. I heard it from them first. 5 years ago fell in love with it. Never say the first half without the second half now. Meet the survivor where they're at, but don't leave them there. Every time you inch them forward, they're one step closer to finding safety, to finding sustainability, to finding healthy relationships, right? That's what you do. That's how you help. Okay. So we go to the next slide. We'll see the key takeaways. The new study found service providers need to work to not dismiss intimate partner sexual violence, to see the bigger picture that it's a part of, and to counteract the gaslighting. We know that building rapport is extremely important when working with intimate partner sexual violence survivors. I mean, if I asked you right now, we've been together now for an hour and 54 minutes. And, if I asked you right now, though, tell me the best sexual experience you've ever had. How many of you would be willing to come off mic right now and tell me in detail all about the best sexual experience you've ever had? Anyone?
One where my needs were honored and the person wasn't pushy.
Right. But no, I want details. I want to know who the person was. I want to know when it happened. I want to know where you were. That's private, Tasha. Oh, no.
No.
You don't want to tell me that. And we're all friends. We're all on the same side here, right? Like we're all doing the thing. We're all good. And that's your best sexual experience. This is somebody who has had the worst experience of their life. They were sexually assaulted by somebody they loved. They don't want to talk about that. You don't want to talk about your best sexual experience with me. Why would somebody want to talk about their worst one? So you've got to build that rapport. And then you have to respect the survivor's decisions and help them safety plan through it. All right. Everybody shake it off, shake your head, roll the shoulders. Any questions? This is your chance. You can come off mute. You can throw them in the chat. Any questions you have. And
I have a question. I'm sorry.
Yes, Tia.
Yes, that was really good what you just said, because it makes sense. If someone had a good experience, they're not going to say anything. They're going to take it as it's private. Correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was at a training where the woman said, I want you to look at the person next to you and tell them about your best sexual experience ever. And that training was the quietest it ever was, because everybody looked and went, I just met this person I'm sitting next to. Or it's somebody I work with. I don't think they need to know about that. Right?
Wow.
So if we don't want to talk about that, why would people want to talk about it? So it's so intimate, it's so private, right? Absolutely. So yeah, but you can do it. You all have the capability to do this, because you wouldn't be in this field if you didn't. If you didn't have that ability to empathize, if you didn't have that ability to build rapport, you wouldn't be doing this work. That's why this work isn't for everybody. That's why you are the refuge, right? So I am putting my email in the chat. If you have any questions, I know you're going to get an evaluation link from MCASA, but I'm going to ask that you also fill out this evaluation link for me. I really, really appreciate it. If you have a chance, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. Please, 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 our evaluation is also anonymous. Need to mention that. Please, please, please reach out if you have any questions. We're glad to help you. We do have somebody on our staff. I am not the reproductive justice expert on our staff. I actually give credit to Meredith Farsani, who is our reproductive justice expert, who created that portion of this presentation. So if you really have any questions about that, you can reach out and she will be more than happy. I can get you in touch with her. She's going to be starting a Lunch and Learn series next year on reproductive justice and all the other things it relates to. So be looking for that. If you're not signed up for our newsletter, you can go to MNADV.com. I'll put that in the chat, and sign up for our newsletter so that you can get things about that, because that reproductive justice series is going to be amazing. She is really, really great on RJ and reproductive coercion and all of that. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. Alyssa, thank you so much again for having me. Thank you to the amazing interpreters who put up with my fast talking. I appreciate you so much. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. And remember, do something nice for yourself today. You deserve it.
Thank you so much, Tony, for that wonderful presentation. So we've put into the chat MCASA's evaluation link and MNADV's evaluation link. I'll be sending a follow-up email later today with a copy of the video recording, the PowerPoint slides, some of the presentation materials that Tony shared, as well as both evaluation links and instructions for receiving your certificate of attendance. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me through the follow-up email. I'll also be sharing Tony's contact information in the follow-up email, so you can direct questions to her as well. So thank you all again for coming today, and we hope to see you tomorrow for our next training session.
Bye.